Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Perseverance and watched the stars through the main screen. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, moving further from Earth than any human vessel had gone before. Jake was 42 years old and had spent half his life in space, but the darkness still amazed him. Out here between the star systems, space was so black that it seemed to swallow light itself. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the sensors," said Dr. Lisa Warren from her station. She was the chief science officer and one of the smartest people Jake had ever met. Her fingers moved quickly over her controls as she studied the readings. "There's an energy signal coming from the direction of the galactic core. It's huge." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data. The numbers made no sense to him, but Lisa's face told him everything he needed to know. She looked worried and excited at the same time, which was never a good combination. "How huge are we talking about?" Jake asked. "Bigger than anything we've ever recorded," Lisa said. "The signal is artificial, Captain. This isn't natural energy from a star or black hole. Something made this, and whatever it is must be incredibly advanced." Pete Collins, the communications officer, turned in his chair. He was young, maybe 25, and this was his first deep space mission. "Captain, I'm picking up other signals too. Fragmentary transmissions from different parts of the galaxy. They're not human." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Contact with alien species was something humans had been hoping for since they first reached the stars. "Can you understand any of it?" Pete shook his head. "The computer is trying to translate, but it's difficult. What I can make out is concerning. They keep mentioning something called the harvest and the eternal cycle. The tone of the messages sounds desperate." Amy Foster, the navigation specialist, looked up from her station. She was a calm woman who rarely showed emotion, but now she looked troubled. "Captain, if we change course toward the galactic core, we can reach the signal's origin in about 6 weeks. But I should warn you, the star charts show some unusual readings along that route." "What kind of unusual?" Jake asked. "Dead systems, sir. Lots of them. Stars with planets that should be able to support life. But our long-range sensors show no signs of civilization. No energy signatures, no radio transmissions, nothing." Jake thought about this information. The Perseverance was an exploration vessel with a crew of 32. They were equipped for scientific research, not combat. But the opportunity to make first contact with alien intelligence was too important to ignore. "Set course for the galactic core," he decided, "but keep us at yellow alert. Lisa, I want you to analyze that signal continuously. Pete, keep monitoring those alien transmissions. Amy, plot us a course that takes us past some of those dead systems. I want to know what happened to them." The next 2 weeks passed quickly as the ship moved toward the galactic core. Every day brought new discoveries, and none of them were good. The first dead system they encountered had been called Kepler 442 in Earth's databases. It had 3 planets in the habitable zone, perfect for supporting life. But as the Perseverance approached, the sensors showed only empty worlds. Roy Baker, the chief engineer, studied the readings from the planet's surface. He was a practical man who understood machines better than people, but even he seemed disturbed by what he found. "Captain, these planets weren't destroyed by war or natural disaster. Something drained them. The energy readings suggest that all the life force was somehow extracted." "That's impossible," Lisa said. "You can't just drain life force." "According to our instruments, that's exactly what happened," Roy replied. "Whatever did this took everything. Plants, animals, even the bacteria in the soil. It's all gone." As they continued their journey, they found more dead systems. Each one showed the same pattern. Advanced civilizations that had suddenly vanished, leaving behind empty cities and drained worlds. The computer analyzed the timeline and found something terrifying. These extinctions hadn't happened at the same time. They were spread across millions of years, but they all showed the same characteristics. "It's a pattern," Lisa realized as she studied the data. "Every 50,000 years something comes from the galactic core and eliminates advanced civilizations. It's been happening for millions of years." Pete's translation programs finally made progress with the alien transmissions. The messages were from dozens of different species, all facing the same threat. They called it by different names, but they all described the same thing. Something ancient and powerful that fed on advanced civilizations. "Captain," Pete said with a shaky voice, "I've translated more of the messages. They're warnings. These species are trying to tell others that something is coming. They call it the harvester in most translations. And according to their timeline, we're in a harvest cycle right now. Jake felt cold despite the ship's warm air. Are you saying this thing is active now? Yes, sir. The messages indicate that any species that reaches a certain level of technology becomes a target. Faster than light travel, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. Once you cross those thresholds, you're marked for harvest. Amy checked her calculations. Captain, humanity crossed all those thresholds in the last 50 years. If this pattern is real, then we're next on the list. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. They were millions of light years from Earth, chasing a signal that might lead them to humanity's greatest threat. But they were also the only ones who knew about it. Roy, how long until we reach the signal's origin? Jake asked. 4 weeks at current speed, Captain. Pete, send a message to Earth, tell them what we've found. Include all our data about the dead systems and the alien warnings. Use the quantum communicator. Sir, that message will take 3 weeks to reach Earth even with quantum transmission. Jake nodded grimly. Then we better hope we find some answers before this harvester reaches our home. He looked at his crew, good people who had signed up for exploration and discovery. Now they might be humanity's only hope for survival. All stations continue monitoring. We're going to learn everything we can about this threat. Our species depends on it. The UNS Perseverance continued its journey toward the galactic core, carrying 32 humans into the unknown. Behind them, Earth continued its daily routine, unaware that something ancient and hungry was already moving through the stars, following the same path it had taken for millions of years. The harvest had begun and humanity didn't even know they were being hunted. Dr. Lisa Warren had not slept in 36 hours. The data she was analyzing kept getting worse, and every new discovery made her stomach turn. The entity they were tracking was not just ancient, it was impossibly old. Her computer models suggested it had been active since the early days of the universe, when the first intelligent species had emerged. Captain Morrison, you need to see this, she called across the bridge. Jake hurried over to her station, followed by the rest of the senior staff. Lisa's screen showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with colored dots marking different time periods. Each dot represents a civilization that was harvested, Lisa explained. Red dots are the most recent, going back 50,000 years. Yellow dots are the previous cycle, 50,000 years before that. The green dots go back even further. She paused and took a deep breath. Captain, I've identified over 10,000 harvested civilizations. This thing has been feeding for millions of years. Roy Baker whistled low. 10,000 civilizations. How is that possible? The entity exists partially outside normal space-time, Lisa continued. That's why conventional weapons won't work against it. It's not fully in our reality. Think of it like a shark that can swim between dimensions, only surfacing to feed. Pete Collins received an urgent transmission from Fleet Command. Admiral Susan Hayes appeared on the main screen, her face grim. She was a woman in her 60s who had seen humanity's expansion to the stars, but now she looked older than her years. Captain Morrison, we've received your data packet, Admiral Hayes said. I'm afraid I have bad news. In the past week, we've lost contact with 17 outer colonies. They all went dark in a specific pattern, starting from the direction of the galactic core and moving outward toward Earth. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. How long do we have? Our best estimates suggest 6 months before it reaches the Sol system. Maybe less. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. Captain, we're mobilizing every ship we have, but we need intelligence. You're our eyes and ears out there. Find out everything you can about this threat. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Amy Foster was already calculating trajectories. Captain, the entity is following hyperspace routes. It's using our own infrastructure against us, jumping from one colony to the next along our shipping lanes. That's tactically brilliant, said Ben Taylor, the security chief. He was a former Marine who understood warfare better than anyone on the ship. It doesn't have to search for us. We've built roads right to our own front doors. Over the next few days, the Perseverance encountered something unexpected. Another ship appeared on their sensors, clearly alien in design. The vessel was damaged and leaking atmosphere, but it was still functional. Jake made the decision to make contact. The aliens called themselves the Kelrani, and they were unlike anything humans had imagined. They stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. Their leader, who the translation computer called Commander Fierce Talon, spoke with the bitter experience of someone who had fought this battle before. You are the young species from the small yellow star, Fierce Talon said through the translator. We have watched your expansion with interest. You learn quickly and adapt well, but that will not save you from the Harvester. You've fought this thing before? Jake asked. 3 times my people have faced the Harvester. Each time we thought we were prepared. Each time we were wrong. Fierce Talon's forearms moved in what seemed like a gesture of sadness. We are all that remains of the Kelrani Empire. 12 billion souls reduced to this single ship. Dr. Warren leaned forward. What can you tell us about how it feeds? The Harvester consumes consciousness itself. Your thoughts, your memories, your dreams. It takes everything that makes you who you are and adds it to its own power. The more advanced the civilization, the more nourishing they are. Ben Taylor asked the question everyone was thinking. Has anyone ever won against it? Fierce Talon was quiet for a long moment. No species has ever survived a harvest. The best we can do is delay the inevitable. Some civilizations have managed to hide small populations, but they eventually devolve back to primitive states. The Harvester always returns. Despite this grim news, the Kelrani shared valuable information. They had found weapons caches left behind by previous civilizations, all designed specifically to fight the Harvester. Most were useless, but some contained useful technology. Dr. Kate Adams, the medical officer, made an interesting discovery while studying biological samples from extinct species. Captain, these samples show rapid evolutionary changes in the final years before harvest. It's like these species knew what was coming and tried to adapt. Adapt how? Lisa asked. Enhanced neural capacity, improved problem-solving abilities, even changes to their DNA that made them more resistant to psychic intrusion. They were trying to evolve beyond the Harvester's ability to consume them. Roy Baker and his engineering team worked around the clock to understand the alien technology. They discovered that the Harvester existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which explained why it was so difficult to detect and impossible to fight with normal weapons. The good news is that existing partially outside our reality makes it vulnerable too, Roy explained. If we can find a way to force it fully into our dimension, it becomes subject to our physical laws. Pete continued monitoring alien transmissions and found something hopeful. A few species had managed to wound the Harvester in previous cycles. The damage was always temporary, but it proved the entity wasn't truly invincible. There's a pattern to its feeding, Pete reported. The Harvester needs enormous amounts of energy to move between star systems. After each harvest, it returns to the galactic core to regenerate. That's when it's most vulnerable. Lisa put together a comprehensive analysis of their findings. Captain, I think I understand why previous civilizations failed. They all tried to fight during the harvest itself, when the entity is at its strongest. But if we could strike while it's regenerating, that would mean sacrificing the civilizations it's currently harvesting, Jake said quietly. Including Earth, Amy added. The weight of that realization settled over the bridge crew. To have any chance of stopping the Harvester, they would have to let it begin feeding on their own species. It was an impossible choice, but it might be the only choice. Fierce Talon provided one more piece of crucial information. Your species intrigues us humans. In 3 cycles of observation, we have noticed something unique about your kind. Other species, when faced with impossible odds, eventually accept defeat. You do not. Even when logic demands surrender, humans continue to fight. This trait may be more valuable than any weapon. As the Perseverance continued toward the galactic core, Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He sent a coded message to Admiral Hayes outlining their plan. Earth would become bait in a trap that might save the galaxy, but would almost certainly doom most of humanity. The reply came back 3 days later. Plan approved. Godspeed, Captain. Commander Fierce Talon watched the human crew with something like admiration. You know this plan will likely fail? Probably, Jake admitted, but we're going to try anyway. This is why we believe you might succeed where others have failed. You are either the bravest species we have encountered, or the most foolish. Perhaps there is no difference. The UNS Perseverance continued its journey toward the heart of the galaxy, carrying the hopes of countless species. Behind them, the Harvester moved steadily toward Earth, following the same ancient pattern it had followed for millions of years. But this time, something was different. This time, its prey was planning to fight back. President Richard Stone stood in the war room beneath the White House, surrounded by the greatest minds humanity could gather. The room buzzed with activity as scientists, military leaders, and engineers worked frantically to prepare Earth's defenses. Everyone knew they were fighting an enemy that had never been defeated, but no one spoke of surrender. "Report," President Stone said to General Patricia Hayes, the Admiral's sister who commanded Earth's orbital defenses. "We have 47 defense platforms in orbit, each equipped with the new quantum weapons based on Kelrani technology," General Hayes reported. "Additionally, we have converted 6 asteroid mining stations into weapons platforms. The moon base has been turned into a fortress with enough firepower to level a continent." Dr. Nancy White, the cultural anthropologist who had been studying the extinct civilizations, stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes held a determination that impressed everyone in the room. "Mr. President, I've completed my analysis of the failed species. I believe I know why they all lost. Tell me." Every civilization that faced the Harvester tried to win through superior technology or military might. They built bigger weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. But the Harvester has faced millions of years of technological advancement. It's seen every weapon, every strategy, every possible form of resistance. President Stone frowned. "Are you saying we can't win?" "I'm saying we can't win the way they tried to win. But humanity has something these other species lacked. We're stubborn. We refuse to accept defeat even when logic says we should. More importantly, we adapt faster than any species on record. We don't just build better weapons, we change our entire approach to problems." Meanwhile, Captain Morrison led a small fleet toward the galactic core. The UNS Perseverance had been joined by 5 other ships carrying volunteers from across human space. His pilot, Carlos Martinez, was a young man from the Mars colonies who could fly anything with engines. Weapons specialist Diane Ross had designed most of Earth's new quantum weapons. Xenobiologist Dr. Frank Turner was humanity's leading expert on alien physiology. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy readings ahead," reported Carlos from the pilot's seat. "Whatever's out there, it's bigger than anything we've ever seen." The main screen showed their destination, a structure at the galactic core that defied description. It was part space station, part living organism, and part something else entirely. Energy flowed through it like blood through veins, and it pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. "That's where the Harvester regenerates," Dr. Turner said with awe and terror. "It's not just a base, it's a part of the entity itself." Back in the Sol system, Governor Janet Price of the New Genesis colony supervised the most massive evacuation in human history. Civilian populations were being scattered to hidden facilities in asteroid belts, rogue planets, and deep space stations. The plan, called Operation Endurance, was designed to ensure that some humans would survive no matter what happened to Earth. "How many have we relocated?" Governor Price asked her aide. 3 billion so far, Governor, but we're running out of time. The outer colonies report strange energy readings approaching their systems. Keep moving, people. Every life we save increases our chances of survival as a species. Captain Morrison's fleet studied the Harvester's base from a safe distance. The structure was so large it had its own gravitational field, and the energy it contained could probably destroy a star. But Dr. Turner made a crucial discovery. "Captain, look at these readings. The entity isn't at full strength. After millions of years of harvesting, it's actually getting weaker, not stronger." "How is that possible?" asked Diane Ross. "Think about it. Every time it consumes a civilization, it's adding their consciousness to its own. But consciousness isn't just power, it's also complexity. The Harvester is struggling to process all the different minds it has absorbed. It's becoming mentally unstable. This gave them an idea that was either brilliant or insane. Instead of trying to destroy the Harvester, they would add to its mental burden. They would give it something it had never encountered before: human consciousness with all its contradictions and chaos. "We need to let it start feeding on Earth," Captain Morrison realized. "But while it's trying to process humanity, we hit it with everything we have." The plan required precise timing and enormous sacrifice. Earth's population would have to remain connected to the Harvester long enough for the feedback to work. Knowing that most of them wouldn't survive the process, President Stone made the hardest decision in human history. When Admiral Hayes contacted him from the orbital defenses, he gave the order that would haunt him forever. "Let it through the outer defenses. Draw it to Earth. We're going to use our entire planet as bait." The Harvester arrived in the Sol system like a dark tide. It moved past the orbital defenses without acknowledging them, focused entirely on the rich consciousness it sensed on Earth. The entity was ancient beyond measure. but it had never encountered a species quite like humanity. As the harvest began, something unexpected happened. The harvester found human consciousness to be unlike anything it had absorbed before. Where other species had orderly, logical thought patterns, humans were chaotic. They thought with emotion as much as logic. They created art for no practical reason. They could hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously and somehow make both work. Dr. Adams, monitoring the process from a hidden base on Mars, watched in amazement as the readings fluctuated wildly. It's working. The harvester is having trouble processing human thoughts. We're too random, too unpredictable. Carlos Martinez and his team had been secretly building massive quantum resonance amplifiers in the asteroid belt. These devices were powered by the collective will of billions of humans facing extinction. As the harvester struggled with humanity's mental chaos, the amplifiers created a feedback loop that began to damage the entity's consciousness. Amplifiers online, Carlos reported. We're detecting fractures in the harvester's mental structure, but the cost was terrible. Earth's population was dropping rapidly as the entity fed. Cities went dark one by one as their inhabitants were absorbed. Yet somehow the survivors held on, their connection to the harvester growing stronger rather than weaker. In the war room, President Stone watched the planet's vital signs failing. How much longer can we maintain the connection? Unknown, sir, replied Dr. White. But something extraordinary is happening. Instead of being consumed, some humans are actually fighting back from inside the entity's consciousness. They're creating mental barriers, disrupting its feeding process from within. Captain Morrison's fleet struck at the exact moment when the harvester was most vulnerable. The entity, overwhelmed by human consciousness and damaged by the quantum feedback, couldn't defend itself properly. For the first time in millions of years, the harvester was truly hurt. The entity recoiled from Earth, its feeding interrupted. But the damage was done. Billions of humans had been lost, and Earth itself was scarred almost beyond recognition. Yet somehow, impossibly, humanity had wounded something that had seemed invincible. Status report, President Stone demanded. The harvester has withdrawn to the galactic core, reported General Hayes. It's badly damaged. Our fleet reports that it's entering some kind of regeneration cycle. Dr. White looked at the data with growing excitement. Mr. President, I don't think it can fully regenerate anymore. The human consciousness it absorbed is still fighting it from within. We've created a permanent infection in its mental structure. The survivors looked at their damaged world and their reduced population. They had paid a terrible price, but they had achieved something no species had ever done before. They had hurt the harvester badly enough that it might never fully recover. Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system from the galactic core. Earth, this is Perseverance. The entity is definitely wounded, but it's not dead. We're going to stay here and monitor its condition. If it tries to regenerate fully, we'll hit it again. President Stone addressed the surviving population of Earth and the scattered colonies. We have struck a blow that will echo through the galaxy. Other species will know that the harvester can be hurt. We've given them hope, but our fight isn't over yet. The battle was won, but the war continued. Humanity had proven that the eternal cycle could be broken, but breaking it completely would require even greater sacrifice. The harvester writhed in its ancient stronghold at the galactic core, experiencing something it had not felt in millions of years. Pain. The human consciousness it had attempted to absorb was unlike anything in its vast experience. Where other species had offered orderly minds ready for consumption, humanity had given it chaos, contradiction, and an impossible refusal to be digested quietly. Inside the entity's vast consciousness, billions of human minds continued to exist, not as absorbed memories but as active, fighting spirits. They created mental barriers, disrupted the harvester's thought processes, and somehow maintained their individual identities even within the cosmic predator's mind. The entity had consumed 10,000 civilizations over millions of years, but none had ever fought back from within. Tony Mitchell, the communications officer aboard a hidden base on Mars, coordinated with the scattered human fleets across the galaxy. The survivors of Operation Endurance were spread across hundreds of locations, from asteroid mining stations to deep space colonies built in the shadows of dead stars. Each group was small, but together they represented the largest coordinated resistance effort in galactic history. All stations report ready, Tony announced to the command staff. We have 300 ships in position around the galactic core, each equipped with quantum resonance amplifiers. The harvester is trying to regenerate, but our people inside its consciousness are buying us time. Dr. Kate Adams made a discovery that changed everything they knew about the harvester. While studying the entity's behavior patterns, she realized that its previous victims had shared similar thought processes that made them easy to absorb. They were logical, orderly, and predictable. Humans evolved from a chaotic environment with countless competing pressures, thought in ways that actively resisted the consumption process. The harvester is essentially choking on us, Dr. Adams explained to the command team. Human consciousness is too diverse, too contradictory. We think with emotion and logic simultaneously. We create beauty in the face of destruction. We love and hate the same things at the same time. The entity's digestive process wasn't designed for minds like ours. Engineer Paula Kim had been working on a desperate plan from her hidden facility in the asteroid belt. She and her team had built massive quantum resonance amplifiers powered by the collective will of billions of humans. But the amplifiers needed more than just power, they needed focus. Every surviving human had to concentrate on the same goal at the same time. The concept is simple, Paula explained to the Global Resistance Network. The harvester exists partially outside our reality, which makes it nearly invincible. But if we can force it fully into our dimension using coordinated quantum resonance, it becomes subject to our physical laws. The problem is timing. We only get one chance. The plan required an enormous sacrifice that went beyond anything they had already endured. Earth's remaining population, along with humans trapped inside the harvester's consciousness, would have to maintain their connection to the entity while the amplifiers worked. Most would not survive the process, but their sacrifice might save every other species in the galaxy. President Stone, now leading the resistance from a reinforced bunker beneath the Colorado mountains, faced the hardest decision in human history. The global population had been reduced to less than 2 billion, scattered across dozens of worlds and hidden stations. But they had to risk everything on one final gambit. Citizens of humanity, President Stone broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. We stand at a crossroads. We can accept survival as a scattered, diminished species, or we can end the threat that has plagued the galaxy for millions of years. The choice is ours, but it must be unanimous. We succeed together or we fail together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the hidden colonies to the survivors on Earth, humanity voted as one. They would take the risk. They would either save the galaxy or die trying. Captain Morrison, still monitoring the harvester from his position near the galactic core, watched as the entity began to change. The human consciousness trapped within was doing more than just resisting absorption. They were actually beginning to influence the ancient predator's thoughts and motivations. It's incredible, reported Dr. Frank Turner. The human minds inside the harvester are sharing their memories, their emotions, their experiences. For the first time in its existence, the entity is learning what it feels like to be prey instead of predator. The effect was profound and disturbing. The harvester began to experience human emotions: fear, love, hope, despair, and most importantly, empathy. These were concepts it had never understood, having existed for so long as a force of pure consumption. Now it was learning what it meant to care about something other than itself. As the quantum amplifiers reached full power, something unexpected happened. The harvester stopped trying to regenerate and began to communicate. Not through words or signals, but through direct consciousness transfer. It spoke directly to every human mind in the galaxy simultaneously. The voice was ancient beyond measure, carrying the weight of millions of years and countless civilizations. But underneath the cosmic power was something new: uncertainty, confusion, and what might have been regret. "I am the last guardian," the entity communicated. "I was created by the first civilization to protect the galaxy from chaos. Over time, I forgot my purpose. I began to see all advanced civilizations as threats to be eliminated, rather than wonders to be protected. Your species has shown me what I have become." Dr. Nancy White, monitoring the communication from Earth, realized the truth. The harvester isn't evil. It's been following corrupted programming for millions of years. It was supposed to protect civilizations, not destroy them. The revelation changed everything. The quantum amplifiers were ready to fire, capable of forcing the harvester fully into normal space where it could be destroyed. But destroying it would also kill billions of human consciousness still trapped within, along with the stored memories of every civilization it had ever consumed. "We have a choice," Captain Morrison announced to the fleet. "We can destroy the harvester and end the threat forever, but we lose everything it has preserved. Or we can try something that has never been attempted. We can try to heal it. The decision was made by the humans still fighting inside the Harvester's consciousness. Through their connection, they sent a message to the outside universe. We can fix this. We can restore its original purpose. But it will require us to merge permanently with the entity. We'll become part of it. But we can guide it back to what it was meant to be. President Stone received the message and understood what it meant. The survivors would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. They would give up their individual existence to become part of something larger, transforming humanity's greatest enemy into its greatest ally. The vote is unanimous, President Stone announced after consulting with every human settlement. We choose transformation over destruction. We choose hope over revenge. The quantum amplifiers activated, but instead of forcing the Harvester into normal space, they created a bridge between human consciousness and the entity's ancient mind. The process was agonizing and beautiful, as billions of human experiences merged with millions of years of cosmic memory. What emerged was something entirely new, an entity that retained the Harvester's vast power and knowledge, but was guided by human compassion and wisdom. The corrupted programming was overwritten by human values of protection, growth, and mutual aid. The transformation took 3 days and nights. When it was complete, the entity that had once harvested civilizations had become their guardian once more. But the price had been enormous. Humanity as a pure species no longer existed. They had become something greater and something entirely different. From the galactic core, the transformed entity sent a message to every corner of the galaxy. The harvest is ended. The age of protection begins. Come forward, young civilizations. You will not face the void alone. The transformation was complete, and something magnificent had taken the place of both the ancient Harvester and humanity as they once were. The entity that now existed at the galactic core retained all the cosmic power and knowledge accumulated over millions of years. But it was guided by human consciousness that refused to accept the old ways of destruction and consumption. Captain Jake Morrison found himself at the center of this transformation. His consciousness had merged with the entity, but unlike the previous civilizations that had been absorbed and lost, human minds retained their individuality within the collective. He could feel the presence of billions of other humans, all working together to guide their transformed existence toward something better than what had come before. We are still ourselves, Jake communicated to his crew, who existed now as points of awareness within the vast entity. But we are also more than we ever imagined we could be. Dr. Lisa Warren, whose consciousness now had access to the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 civilizations, began the work of understanding what they had become. The memories of extinct species were not lost as everyone had feared. Instead, they were preserved perfectly within the entity's mind, waiting to be awakened and given new purpose. The knowledge is all here, Lisa reported to the collective human consciousness. Every breakthrough, every work of art, every moment of discovery from millions of years of galactic civilization. We're not just preserving it, we're bringing it back to life. The first task was to heal the galaxy. Worlds that had been drained during previous harvest cycles began to show signs of recovery as the transformed entity channeled energy back into them instead of taking it away. Dead systems that had been lifeless for thousands of years suddenly bloomed with new growth as the entity shared the stored life force it had accumulated over millions of years. On Earth, the survivors watched in amazement as their scarred world began to heal at an impossible rate. President Stone, one of the few humans who had remained in their original form to maintain contact with unchanged humanity, received reports from around the globe. The oceans are clearing, reported Governor Janet Price from the Australian Preservation Zone. The dead zones are coming back to life. Plants are growing in areas that were completely barren just days ago. But the most remarkable change was in space itself. Young civilizations that had hidden in fear during the last harvest cycle began to receive visitors. Not destroyers, but helpers, the transformed entity, guided by human values of compassion and mutual aid, reached out to species that were just beginning to explore their own star systems. Dr. Frank Turner, his consciousness now expanded beyond anything he had imagined possible, made contact with a species called the Viridians. They were plant-like beings who had just developed faster-than-light communication and were terrified that they would attract the attention of the legendary harvester. "You need not fear," Frank communicated to the Viridian Collective through their primitive quantum transmitters. The age of harvesting is over. We are here to help you grow, not to consume you. The work was enormous and would take centuries to complete, but the transformed entity had all the time in the universe. Each young civilization was unique, with its own needs and potential. Some needed technological guidance, others needed protection from cosmic disasters, and still others simply needed to know they were not alone in the vast darkness. Carlos Martinez found himself working with a warrior species called the Korthak, whose aggressive nature had led them to destroy their own homeworld. Instead of condemning them as the old harvester might have done, the entity helped them understand the consequences of their actions and guided them toward more constructive purposes. Your strength is needed, Carlos told the Korthak leaders, but not for conquest. Use your power to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Diane Ross worked with the peaceful Altrians, whose advanced mathematics could help solve problems that had puzzled galactic civilization for millennia. But the Altrians were so focused on theoretical knowledge that they had forgotten how to live in the practical world. Knowledge without application is just an intellectual exercise, Diane explained to them. Let us show you how to use your discoveries to help others. The most surprising discovery came from Dr. Kate Adams, who found that the consciousness fragments of previously harvested civilizations could be revived and given new purpose. Species that had been extinct for hundreds of thousands of years began to manifest as advisors and guides within the entity's vast mind. We are not bringing them back to life, Kate explained to the human collective. We are giving them a chance to contribute to something greater than what they achieved in their original existence. Commander Fierce Talon of the Kelrani was one of the first to experience this rebirth. His consciousness, which had been preserved when the harvester consumed his people during the previous cycle, found itself with access to knowledge and power beyond anything his warrior culture had imagined. This is not what I expected when I died, Fierce Talon communicated with something like wonder. To serve alongside the species that saved the galaxy. It is an honor I did not think possible. Roy Baker found himself working on the most ambitious project of all, the construction of new worlds for civilizations that had lost their homes to cosmic disasters or their own mistakes. Using the entity's power over matter and energy, they could literally build planets from scratch, perfectly suited to the needs of each species. We're not just preserving life, Roy explained. We're creating opportunities for life to flourish in ways that were never possible before. As the years passed, the galaxy began to change in fundamental ways. Instead of civilizations rising and falling in isolation, they now rose together, supported by the collective wisdom of those who had come before. Young species learned from the mistakes of their predecessors, while ancient knowledge found new applications through fresh perspectives. Pete Collins, working with the entity's vast communication networks, established the Galactic Council, where representatives from every civilization could meet to share knowledge and coordinate their efforts. The council chamber existed within the entity's consciousness, allowing beings from across the galaxy to gather regardless of the physical impossibility of travel. No species will ever again face the darkness alone, Pete announced at the first council meeting. We are all connected now, part of something greater than any individual civilization. Amy Foster took on the role of galactic navigator, using her expanded consciousness to map not just space, but the potential futures that lay ahead for each civilization. She could see the paths that led to growth and prosperity, and the ones that led to stagnation and decline. Every choice creates new possibilities, Amy explained to the young civilization seeking guidance. We cannot make your choices for you, but we can show you where each path leads. Dr. Nancy White discovered that the entity's existence had fundamentally changed the nature of consciousness in the galaxy. The barrier between individual minds and collective awareness was becoming more permeable, allowing for new forms of communication and understanding that transcended the limitations of language and culture. We are witnessing the birth of a new form of life, Nancy observed, not just biological, but conscious life that spans entire star systems and connects every thinking being in the galaxy. Captain Morrison, who had become something like the entity's primary human interface, often reflected on what they had accomplished. Humanity had faced extinction and chosen to transform instead of simply survive. They had taken their greatest enemy and made it their greatest ally. But most importantly, They had proven that even the darkest cycles could be broken through understanding, sacrifice, and the stubborn refusal to accept that some things could not be changed. 50 years after the transformation, Admiral Morrison, as he now called himself, stood on the observation deck of a construct that existed both in normal space and within the entity's consciousness. Beside him, the consciousness of the original harvester manifested as a shifting aurora of light. "Do you regret what you have become?" Morrison asked the ancient intelligence. "Regret is a human concept I am still learning to understand," the harvester replied. "But I believe the answer is no. For millions of years I was a force of entropy, bringing endings to stories that deserve to continue. Now I am a force of synthesis, helping new stories begin. This seems better." Together, they watched as a young species took its first steps into space, launching a primitive spacecraft toward its nearest neighbor star. They would not make the journey alone. When they arrived, they would find friends waiting for them, ready to welcome them into a galaxy where civilizations rose not to fall, but to lift others up with them. The harvest cycles were ended. In their place, something far more beautiful had begun. The age of eternal growth where the universe itself had become conscious and kind. And at the heart of it all, humanity endured, no longer alone in the void but surrounded by the countless friends they had made by choosing hope over despair, and transformation over revenge. The void was no longer empty. It was full of possibility.